sounds, and there is a key taken and opening up the bottomless pit, and the king of the bottomless pit emerges, whose name is Abaddon or Apollyon. Manly Hall writes about this trumpet blast and says, the blast of the trumpet represents the creative word, by the intoning of which man is liberated from his terrestrial limitations. So we see here that Albert Pike, Manly Hall, and other Masonic writers are constantly and consistently referring to Osiris or Adonis or Bacchus or any of these other gods, these sun gods, as a young man. Now let's go back to the pages of the Scripture to get more understanding concerning exactly who this sun god is, or who this young man is, and who he represents. 2 Samuel chapter 14 verse 21, and the king said unto Joab, behold now, I have done this thing. Go therefore, bring the young man Absalom again. Remember that Absalom was the son of David, who was the enemy of David, who was trying to take over the throne of King David. Also remember that Absalom had long flowing hair. He was hanged in a tree, and then he was buried in a pit. This concept that the Antichrist is equal to the lost word of Freemasonry is echoed by Manly Hall when he speaks of an ancient, mystical, hidden, secret book called the Book of Thoth. The Book of Thoth was kept in a golden box in the inner sanctuary of the temple. There was but one key, and this was in the possession of the master of the mysteries, the highest initiate of the Hermetic Arcanum. He alone knew what was written in the secret book. The Book of Thoth was lost to the ancient world with the decay of the mysteries, but its faithful initiates carried it sealed in the sacred casket into another land. This Masonic symbol of a casket containing the lost word of Freemasonry can be seen on this early Masonic tracing board. Surrounding this casket are 3 fives. This then is a reference to Isaiah chapter 14 and Lucifer's ultimate plan to be like the Most High. When taken together, these 3 fives would form the number 555. This just happens to be the exact number of times that the name Christ is mentioned in the King James Bible. In the late 16th century, artist Nicholas Poussin created a portrait called The Shepherds of Arcadia. This portrait was made famous by the authors of the Holy Blood, Holy Grail. It features 3 shepherds and a woman standing in front of a secret tomb. The shepherds are pointing to a caption engraved in the stone of the monument which says, Et in Arcadia ego, which translated into English says, I am also in Arcadia. It has been suggested that the phrase is actually an anagram for the Latin phrase I tego arcana Dei, which translates, Begone, I keep God's secret. Arcadia is named for Arcus, the son of Zeus, and Callisto. A different rendering of the Shepherds of Arcadia was done by Giovanni Barbieri in 1618. It features 2 shepherds beholding a human skull that has a deadly head wound in it. In the opening chapter of Dan Brown's The Lost Symbol, Brown reveals a Masonic ritual that includes the participant in a Masonic communion service drinking wine from a human skull. The meaning behind the symbols of the wine and the skull are revealed to us in Revelation chapter 17. And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, and I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth hath committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of the abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. This skull is also featured in what's known as the Masonic Chamber of Reflection. A chamber of reflection is often used by Freemasons as a place to go and reflect and meditate upon their own death. Dan Brown speaks of there being a chamber of reflection in an underground room underneath the United States Capitol building. In the Masonic reflection room, on the table, there is a skull and crossbones. We've already seen the meaning behind the skull and the crossbones. Remember, the crossbones are a symbol of an X chromosome. The skull represents the Antichrist added to the X chromosome where our DNA is stored. The most visible yet secretive part of the Masonic chamber of reflection is a word written upon the background. That word is vitriol. In alchemy, this represents another name for sulfuric acid, a dissolving agent. It is noted by Masonic authors that the word vitriol has 7 letters. These 7 letters are representative of the number 7, which represents the 7 heads of the Antichrist, or the 7 spirits of the Antichrist. It is revealed that the letters of the word vitriol stand for a Latin phrase, visita interiora terrae, rectificando invenis occultum lapidem. This translates into English, visit the center of the earth, and by rectifying ye shall find the hidden stone. That hidden stone is the lapis exilum, the lost word of Freemasonry, the Antichrist. Now, let me tell you a little story about the obelisk. You've probably seen this image in a lot of places. There's one in the Vatican. Dan Brown reveals in the Da Vinci Code that there's one in a Roman Catholic cathedral called Saint-Sulpice, which is located in Paris, France. This obelisk happens to be 33 feet tall. Now, we're going to see the symbolic meaning of that number as we end this video. And of course, the most famous one is located in Washington, D.C. The story of the obelisk goes like this. Remember Osiris, the sun god? He's related to all of these other gods that we have seen that have been murdered. Osiris was murdered by his brother Typhon, and then his body was cut into 14 pieces. Now remember Isis. She represents the woman who is weeping over the broken column. Isis takes Osiris' body and gathers up all the fragments of his body and puts them back together so that he can live again. But she can only find 13 pieces to his body. The 14th piece, his phallus, is still covered. It's still hidden. It still remains a mystery awaiting to be found. So therefore, the obelisk represents the concealment of the Mason's lost word, or a symbol of the Antichrist. Now I think, as I look at the symbol of the obelisk, I think that it not only represents a phallus, it represents an uncircumcised phallus. Remember when David was fighting Goliath. Now I want you to get this of who exactly Goliath was. Goliath was, according to the scriptures, the product of the sons of God mingling themselves with the daughter of men and producing the race of the giants. That's found in Genesis chapter 6. Genesis 6 reveals that this process took place before the flood and it took place after the flood. So here we have a Goliath who represents the Antichrist in the last days. We already saw the 6s that were all over him earlier on in this video. And here's what David said concerning Goliath. David spake to the men and stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? He later says, Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. Remember in Revelation chapter 13, those are both emblems of the Antichrist, the beast. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. Of course, it is interesting to note, with all that we've seen so far in this video, that in this country, and maybe in other countries, an obelisk is often used as a marker over the tomb of a dead person. Now, it was noted earlier that the house of the Temple Lodge in Washington, D.C. contained 33 columns. The throne on the inside of the temple room where the worshipful master is seated is a 33-foot high throne. This lodge is located at 1733, which makes it the 33rd house on the 17th block. The Masonic Cathedral in St. Louis also bears the number 33 in its address. Several years ago, House Resolution number 33 was passed, commending the influence of Freemasonry in America. The number 33 inside of a triangle adorns the image of the double eagle of Freemasonry. This is the image of the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Albert Pike reveals that the double-headed eagle, with one head facing one direction and one head facing the other, refers to the fusion of opposites contained in one body, male and female, the heaven with the earth, the human fused with the divine. In the lost symbol, Dan Brown, using information gathered from Manly Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, references the name of God in the first chapter of Genesis. In fact, in the King James Bible, in Genesis chapter 1, the name of God is mentioned exactly 32 times. The 33rd time that God's name is mentioned is found in Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. And on the seventh day, God ended His work which He had made. And He rested on the seventh day from all His work which He had made. So then, following this pattern in Masonic ideology, the number 32 represents the great arcanum, or the great work of Freemasonry. The number 33, or the 33rd time God is mentioned in the King James Bible, represents the finished work on the seventh day. This is a Masonic reference to the number 7, and a reference not just to the creation of mankind, but the recreation of mankind. Manly P. Hall says that the 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry is related to the 33 bones of the human spinal column. This is related to the Eastern mystic idea or concept called Kundalini. Kundalini teaches that at the base of everyone's spine is a coiled serpent. Through certain rituals and certain practices, or in time, the serpent will uncoil itself, writhing itself around upward through the 33 bones of the human spinal column, up into the human skull where the pineal gland is located, giving the human being enlightenment, or the third eye of godhood. Concerning this, Manly Hall reveals the following: the exact science of human regeneration is the lost key of Masonry. For when the spirit fire is lifted up through the 33 degrees or segments of the spinal column and enters into the domed chamber of the human skull, it finally passes into the pituitary body, which represents Isis, where it invokes Ra, the pineal gland, and demands the sacred name. Now let's go to the pages of the Bible, and we will clearly see that the number 33 is the quintessential number for the revealing of the beast in the last days. Remember, this was prophesied in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, that the man of sin would be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he is God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Now remember, this Antichrist, or this beast, the son of perdition, the man of sin, is opposing everything that is called God or that is worshipped. The beast stands in direct opposition to number 1, God Himself, and number 2, the people of God. And so for a clear picture of this, let's go back to the book of Joshua, chapter 12. The Bible says, "Now these are the kings of the land which the children of Israel smote, and possessed their land on the other side Jordan toward the rising of the sun, from the river of Arnon unto Mount Hermon, and all the plain on the east." Now, here's the interesting part. Moses was the one who was responsible for leading the children of Israel from Egypt to as far as the Jordan River. During that time, the two opposing kings, or the kings that opposed Israel's march into the Promised Land, were Sihon and Og, who was the king of the giants. Moses and his army was responsible for killing those two kings. And then, in Joshua chapter 12, we read on to see that after Moses has departed from the scene, Joshua then leading the children of Israel across the river Jordan into the Promised Land. We pick up in verse 9, we see the king of Jericho, the king of Ai, the king of Bethel, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, all the way down, verse 23, the king of Dor and the coast of Dor, the king of the nations of Gilgal 1, the king of Tirzah 1, and all the kings 31. So in other words, this